David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So I really want to spend some time today talking about what is now, at first we suspected it, but it's now very clear, is the real possibility of violence. I'm talking about physical violence if Donald Trump were to lose in November. And this is, I don't really want to make this about Trump because it's not. This really ties together sort of the faux populist rhetoric that I've been warning about. It ties together Fox News and the propaganda space. And in order to talk about this today, we're going to look at a clip from Tucker Carlson's program on Monday. I believe it was on Monday night. And what I want you to consider here is not just the growing influence of Tucker Carlson. And in fact, there are people now talking about, what about Tucker for president in 2024? If Trump can be president, certainly, at least theoretically, Tucker Carlson could be president of the United States. And I know that that will be very, very scary to many of you. But I also want to use the clips we're going to look at today as a sort of case study in how the media propaganda cycle works and how it will completely reverse reality and take advantage of the lack of education and critical thinking skills that are part of what got Donald Trump elected in the first place. So Tucker Carlson is no longer playing coy. He is straight up saying the left is dangerous, the left hates America, and the left is a fundamental threat to the way of life that Tucker, I guess, espouses through his faux populist rhetoric. Tucker Carlson, in doing this, is setting the stage for violence if Donald Trump loses. He's both planting the seed of the idea in the minds of right-wingers, and he's giving right-wingers justification for doing violence if Joe Biden were to get elected in November. And the sort of crux of it is the left hates America. The left despises this country. And we're going to look at a segment. It was a 15-minute segment. We're going to look at some different pieces of it. And after opening up this segment by talking about how the left only hates Trump because they can't control him, not because he's incompetent, not because he's actively damaging the United States every single day. Tucker says the left just hates Trump because they can't control him. He's a free thinker. He's an independent mind. He starts to weave us through this left hates America idea by saying it starts in school. School kids aren't taught the history of Mount Rushmore and Thomas Jefferson that Donald Trump talked about at his July 3rd Mount Rushmore speech. And they're not taught about how the U.S. is a force for good that defeated fascism and communism. It starts in school, Tucker Carlson says. Take a look.
Yet, as the president pointed out, American school children learn virtually none of this. Instead, our curricula have become a toxic mix of lies and omission, all of it designed to poison our children against the country that formed them.
Against every law of society and nature, our children are taught in school to hate their own country and to believe that the men and women who built it were not heroes, but that were villains. The radical view of American history is a web of lies. All perspective is removed. Every virtue is obscured. Every motive is twisted. Every fact is distorted. And every flaw is magnified until the history is purged and the record is disfigured beyond all recognition.
Every word of that is true. If you have kids in school, you know it may even be understatement. What is happening in our classrooms right now in 2020 is a crime. It is long past time that a sitting president said so.
So why am I starting with the stuff about schools? Why is Tucker starting with the stuff about schools? This is how you start priming the right towards violence. Our schools have been taken over by liberal lies and liberal liars. Trump is saying it, and Tucker is willing to say it, and that's the framework for what is going to come. Now, the reason this is so pernicious is that our schools are failing. It is true that much of our education system is not working, but it's failing as evidenced by Trump being elected. In other words, it's failing as evidenced by 60 plus million people falling for the obviously false talking points of the Trump campaign in 2015 and 2016 and voting for him. So there's a big problem with our schools. But the problem isn't our kids are being taught what I guess Tucker and Trump say is some incorrect version of history. Our schools are failing in that American students are falling further and further behind in math and science compared to many other countries. Our schools are failing in that critical thinking and civics and media literacy are all but gone unless you're like really lucky or seek them out at some narrow slice of the school of public schools. And because of that, 60 million Americans voted for Donald Trump. But people fall for stuff like we have 15 cases of coronavirus, which will soon be 0, right? That's the evidence that education is failing. People fall for these bogus tax cuts that are really, you get a little more money in your paycheck, but your refund is smaller at the end of the year. Millions of people fell for that. So this is how Tucker lays the groundwork. Schools cannot be trusted, and schools are ruining our kids and turning them against our country. Now we go to the next part of this monologue, skipping ahead a couple of minutes. Tucker starts ginning up the hatred with dog whistles, starts up again with the violent protests. Check out how he transitions here.
If you spent the rest of your life trying to locate, to identify the worst people in this country of 330 million, you couldn't get a purer distillation than what you just saw. These people are liars. They're the same people who spent the last month telling you that the riots you saw live on television were actually peaceful protests against racism. That was a lie. They knew it was a lie when they said it, but they said it anyway in order to undermine a country that they hate. Yes, hate. America deserves to be in flames. That is their view. And this weekend, they said it essentially out loud.
No one said that riots and looting were peaceful protesting. What we said was, which is true, we had overwhelmingly peaceful protests against police brutality. And in addition to that, there were some looters and there were some rioters. And I can only speak for myself, but I didn't say that that was evidence of peaceful protesting. The peaceful protesting was peaceful protesting. The other stuff was other things. But now you see the big picture, the narrative that Tucker Carlson is weaving. And I admit it, he does it well. These are well-scripted monologues where, listen, schools are teaching kids to hate America. That was part one. Then those kids become left-wing rioters who go out and destroy our cities because they've been taught to hate America. So he's building up the justification for violence if Donald Trump were to lose. And then he goes fully into it. The left hates America. That is the next part of the message. And if Tucker convinces his audience that the left hates America, violence against the left in their eyes would be justified because it would be protecting America. And that's where Tucker keeps going and comes full circle now with Joe Biden. This is a clever monologue. This is, because a lot of the people who watch these programs lack the basic critical thinking and epistemology skills and media literacy skills, this is a far more clever monologue than most of Tucker's viewers are going to be able to pick apart for what it is. You start with our schools teach kids to hate, which has led the left to hate America and go and riot. And then that same left who hates America wants to elect Joe Biden. And that's how he links it all together to Joe Biden and lays the groundwork for violence if Biden wins. Take a look.
So where's Joe Biden on all of this as the revolution continues apace? Biden is supposed to be a moderate, remember? That was his chief appeal. But there was nothing moderate about Biden's 4th of July statement. Instead, it was a full-throated attack on the United States.
Our country was founded on an idea. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We've never lived up to it. Jefferson himself didn't. He held slaves. Women were excluded. American history is no fairy tale. It's been a constant push and pull between the two parts of our character. The idea that all men and women, all people are created equal, and the racism that has torn us apart. We have a chance to rip the roots of systemic racism out of this country.
That's your 4th of July message? Systemic racism? Something you can't even define, that has no real definition? Really? Wagging your finger in the face of the nation that promoted someone as mediocre as you to the position you currently hold? This is the man who could soon be our figurehead.
So now you've seen the full path. The left hates our country because schools are teaching them to. After learning to hate the country, they go out and attack the country by rioting and looting. And then they will support Joe Biden, who is supportive of that America hatred and rioting and looting. He's suggesting the imagery of a Joe Biden presidency as a presidency equivalent to, tantamount to, hating America and rioting and looting. And then on the tail end, Tucker wraps it up with this sort of faux modest statement of, on this program, we really try not to question people's patriotism because that's a really serious thing to do. But we have to, because clearly these people hate the country. Take a look at that.
So what to make of all of this? Well, it's long been considered out of bounds to question a person's patriotism. It's a very strong charge, and we try not ever to make it. But in the face of all of this, the conclusion can't be avoided. These people actually hate America. There's no longer a question about that. And yet, paradoxically, at the same time, they desperately want to control America more than anything. And that leads to the most basic of all questions. Can you really lead a country that you hate? Ask yourself, what kind of parent would you be if you hated your children? What kind of officer would you make if you didn't care about your troops? It would be awful. The results would be ugly. It would not work. Loving the people you lead, caring deeply about them, is the most basic prerequisite of leadership. The leaders of today's Democratic Party do not. They despise this country. They have said so. They continue to. That is shocking, but it is also disqualifying. We cannot let them run this nation because they hate it. Imagine what they would do to it.
They hate America is the fundamental message. So the right is falling for this hook, line, and sinker. And it is so unhinged that it actually could bring the right to violence if Joe Biden wins. If you believe Tucker about this, if you sit there for the 13 and a half minutes or however long it is, and you nod along and you say, yeah, schools are teaching kids to become protesters who riot and then elect Joe Biden. If Trump loses on November 3rd and you believe that, you might feel justified in going out with your guns to try to put a stop to this America hatred from the left. And this gets us back to something that I've now had to bring up 3 or 4 times, which is the populist rhetoric bamboozles people. When I talked 6 weeks ago, maybe, about how I'm worried that left populist rhetoric may be replacing the actual set of ideas that is social democracy, the main concern was the rhetoric sounds pretty damn good. And it's very similar rhetoric from left to right when it comes to populism. The middle class is the core of this country, and we need to support the average person and all of this different stuff. This is exactly what I'm talking about, because then they slip in the prescription, which is no leftists, conservative school agendas, no immigrants, Black Lives Matter will take your house. The prescription is absolutely bonkers. And notice that Tucker doesn't talk about policy. And when Tucker bragged in the monologue, I don't know if I played it, but it was in the monologue. Tucker said Trump's speech at Mount Rushmore was one of the best of his presidency. Tucker said, you'll notice that speech at Mount Rushmore had essentially no policy ideas. It was Trump railing against Marxists who don't exist. There's no prominent Marxist that Trump is reasonably fighting against. He railed against anarchists on the left. He railed against people who teach our kids to hate America. There was no list of accomplishments of what Trump did other than, lies about defeating the virus, which we clearly haven't done. And there was no sort of guidebook for what you would get policy-wise from Trump in his second term. This is the epitome of being bamboozled by populist rhetoric. No policy. And Tucker says that was a great speech. Trump really laid it out. All Trump laid out is an imaginary enemy, a straw man from the left of these violent Marxist anarchists which don't exist. And then Trump then has the benefit of Tucker going to his audience and saying, that was a great speech. It was an amazingly good speech that Donald Trump gave. All Trump said is the left is radical and hates everybody and blah, 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 and respect our heritage. Again, another allusion to Confederate statues and the Confederate flag. So this is extremely dangerous, and it's particularly dangerous for 2 reasons. One, I'm not trying to insult people when I say this, but the lack of critical thinking and media literacy skills in this country makes this stuff really effective. That monologue already has like 1.5 million views on YouTube. And there are people on the right and even some on the left who are getting tricked into sharing this Tucker Carlson stuff. So we've got to do something about it. I don't even know what it is because the audience that he is catering to with this garbage is ripe for it. They're not going to then come and watch me spend 15 minutes explaining to you how you're being bamboozled by this. So if I don't sound optimistic, it's because I'm not. I don't know what the solution is, and it's extraordinarily dangerous what's going on. I want to hear your thoughts about it. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. Remember that you can get the full audio podcast of the show every day on whatever your favorite podcasting platform is, be it Spotify or Pandora or iTunes or Google Play. It's free. Get the daily podcast. And then next Tuesday, two big things going on Tuesday. Number one, the third David Pakman Show chess tournament at 8 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. You can register for free at davidpakman.com/chess. And then number two, we took a big hit on memberships in the last week. We're trying to dig out from a hole of like 300 cancellations. So Tuesday, the same day as the chess tournament, we're going to do a one-day membership special where we will email out to everybody on our mailing list a very exclusive one-day discount code. By exclusive, it just means you've got to be getting our newsletter. You can sign up to be notified on davidpakman.com, upper right of the website. Type in your email address, sign up for the newsletter. You'll be notified very powerfully on Tuesday. And then I hope you'll join us for the chess tournament as well.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new members of the day are Robin Nye and Javier Palau. Thanks to Robin and Javier for the memberships and for the support. You can join them at joinpakman.com. And if you stick around long enough, you might be the longtime sustaining member of the day someday in the future. Today's longtime sustainer is Kelly Lindsay, who's been a David Pakman Show member for almost 5 years. Incredible. So we've been tracking the rise of coronavirus cases in the United States, and we started seeing the numbers spike on June 19th. There was the idea in late April, early May, that that was the peak when we had 30,000 new cases a day in April, May. We were hoping, I certainly was hoping that we were past the peak, at least the wave one peak. And it looked like maybe we were until June 19th, when we started seeing cases climb and climb and climb, up to as many as 60,000 new cases a day a few days ago, centered around California and a bunch of red states, including Arizona, Florida, and Texas, at the top of that list. And what we observed for the last 20 or so days was that even though the cases were spiking, the deaths were staying pretty low. And you can see if you're looking at the chart of deaths, they've been trending down. And all along, there were questions about how is this possible? What's going on? Now, the most obvious explanation, maybe we would call it the simplest explanation, we could say the explanation that requires the fewest assumptions, is that there's simply a lag between cases and deaths. You don't die the day you're diagnosed. So when you see cases spike, you would expect that it would take some time before those increased case numbers turn into deaths. There were other explanations that we considered as well. Is it possible that the virus has mutated to be less deadly? It's possible. We didn't have any evidence for it. Is it possible that doctors are getting better at treating coronavirus patients, which is decreasing the death rate? Certainly possible. Could it be that more testing means healthier people are getting tested? So even though you have more cases, the share of cases that are serious could be declining, and that's why the deaths continue to trend down? Or is it younger people getting coronavirus who are less likely to get really sick? All of these are reasonable possibilities to wonder about. But if the explanation is the first one, which is there's a lag between cases and deaths, we would expect that somewhere in the range of 18 to 21 days after the cases spike, deaths would start to spike. 18 to 21 days from the start of the case spike is this week. It's yesterday. It's today. It's tomorrow. And sadly, tragically, yesterday, Arizona and Texas both hit single-day death records dating all the way back to the start of the pandemic. Yesterday, we had, again, nearly 60,000 new cases of coronavirus reported and deaths in Arizona and Texas. And by the way, also in California. California is not exempt from this, but it's been mostly the red staters saying that it's Arizona and Texas that weren't going to see the death spike. They are spiking. Arizona with 117 deaths yesterday. Texas with 84 deaths yesterday. Those are sad. These are not records we want to be setting. These are tragic new high marks for coronavirus deaths in a single day. Now, I don't want to be alarmist, and I hope that I'm wrong, and I believe that I've been relatively sober in my analysis of coronavirus from the start. The simplest explanation is that the deaths are spiking because the cases spiked 20 days ago. And if that's the case, in another 10 days, the death numbers are going to look really, really bad. And what I mean by that is cases started to spike on June 19th. So the small spike in deaths we're seeing now would be related to the start of the spike in cases on June 19th. Around July 1st, the new case numbers were dramatically higher than on June 19th. And if that tracks as a leading indicator to eventual deaths, in another 10 or 15 days, we are going to have unconscionable numbers coming out of some of these states. It's horrible when we're right about terrible things. And this is really, really terrible. Now, if we want to find something to look at that looks okay, there are still some states doing quite well. Right now, the states with the lowest reproduction rate of the virus are Connecticut, Washington, D.C., which is not a state, Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maryland, and Utah. Although the reproduction rate there, what's called the R0 or the R0, it's starting to creep up. And what I believe is going on is nothing that requires any kind of particular insight. The states that are doing well can only hold off cases for so long if other states are a disaster, because travel between states is constitutionally, it's a constitutional right in the United States, ingress and egress from and to states. And when you look at the county level map of the United States and you see, the red and orange counties, the ones that are in trouble, they're right next to counties that are doing far better. And so I believe that, sadly, unless there are some interstate travel restrictions put in place, which I'm neither recommending nor do I believe would necessarily be legal, I'm merely making a sort of mathematical statement, you're going to see some of the states that are doing well start to do less well if cases continue to skyrocket in places like Florida, Arizona, California, Texas, and many others. I can't even give you the full list. Now, I do think also that there are some governors, including our governor here. I believe Charlie Baker here in Massachusetts has widely done a very good job. And what I'm worried about is they're now doing the indoor dining in Massachusetts. I got a message from my gym that it's opening next Monday. I think that this is a mistake. We've done so much work here for the last 4 months to get down to only having a couple hundred new cases a day without a spike. It's like every day about 200 cases. It seems to me, given that it's summer, given that people can do outdoor dining, given that people can do outdoor workouts, I understand the business side of it. It seems too risky to me to do indoor dining or to open gyms, movie theaters, and some of the other things being discussed. I won't be partaking. I've been doing the outdoor dining. It feels safe. It's more than enough. It's warm out. I think that that's a risk for the states that are doing well to do right now. And I hope that I'm wrong, but the numbers are truly, truly scary. So I want to talk a little bit about PPP funds. When these programs were put in place, I could have gone out and gotten PPP money to pay employees and to pay studio rent, even though we're not using the studio right now. We're still paying rent for it because we have a lease. But when this opportunity was presented to me, I kind of thought it through and I realized we are getting hit because of the virus. A lot of people are canceling memberships. We're having some advertisers drop out. YouTube revenue is down, but we're not really that affected. Like if I was a restaurant that was closed, my revenue has just gone to zero. So I decided there's limited money. I'm not going to take this funding. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to leave the money for somebody else. I opted out, and some people in our audience grabbed some memberships and made up for a little bit of the hole we were digging out of. We've now learned, because the data has been released about who received large amounts of money through this government bailout program, that Kanye West's clothing line has been bailed out. Scientology, the Church of Scientology, took money. Kanye West's clothing line was cleared to receive $5 million. This is a $1 billion brand. They received $5 million. The Church of Scientology, which is so wealthy and a major holder of real estate. And I want to remind people that these were loans designed in a way where, as long as the loans are used with certain parameters, like to pay for payroll, et cetera, you don't need to repay the money. So these were loans that are largely forgivable if you use the money in the prescribed ways. So for churches and other entities that don't pay taxes, they aren't paying taxes, which is ultimately where this money comes from, right? This money's coming from government revenues, the taxes I pay, the taxes you pay. And they are taking that money, American citizen money, and then they are receiving it, and they're never going to have to pay it back. And the example, I mean, there's so many examples. I could spend all day just giving you examples. The Soho House, which is a membership club controlled by a billionaire named Ron Burkle, they got loans between $9 and $23 million. They applied for a bunch of loans. They have different locations in Miami Beach and Chicago and New York, et cetera. More than 400 country clubs and golf resorts got PPP money. The Ayn Rand Institute, which is all about Ayn Rand's philosophy about self-sufficiency and not depending on governments. The Ayn Rand Institute, who we've done work with, we've interviewed people from the Ayn Rand Institute, and I've moderated some debates. They took money. Remember, Ayn Rand was against depending on government, but received welfare benefits. The Ayn Rand Institute, which espouses her ideology, also got PPP bailout money. So there's a few different things here. Number one, this is why we need oversight, and this is why they didn't want oversight. All the billionaire developer Joe Farrell, who builds mega mansions in the Hamptons, got a PPP loan of somewhere up to $1 million. Private jet companies, which have quickly rebounded because rich people now, instead of flying first class, or chartering a private jet, they're increasingly buying private jets, or private jet companies are buying more jets in order to allow rich people to charter them. So they very quickly recovered. Private jet companies got PPP money, including JetLinks Aviation. It's an insanely long list. But meanwhile, all these small businesses have failed. Restaurant owners I know in Eastern Massachusetts and in Western Massachusetts and even in other parts of the country, they're just closing. They're done. They're not coming back. And again, I could have taken some PPP cash to pay employees and cover studio rent, but because I decided, we're not that bad off, we're not that poor, we're not that poorly positioned, I can just kind of go to my audience and say, listen, a lot of people had to cancel. Maybe you can get a $6 a month membership. Like, that was my ask, because I wanted to do what I thought was the right thing. So it's very disturbing to see the way that this has gone down. Of course, a lot of, it's crony capitalism. A lot of Trump's friends have gotten huge money. But there's also the irony that the same people who say we shouldn't be dependent on government are actually the first in line for the handouts. And a lot of them are wealthy conservatives. Every broke and struggling small business owner should be furious about what's going on. And, the right loves to claim to be against socialism, but they're against it as long as it's not helping poor people, right? When it's not helping poor people, that was confusing. When it's not helping poor people, when it's helping them and their friends, all of a sudden socialism is okay. And last point on this, if you know how they always say, well, private companies are going to do better jobs at things than the government. If a private company had screwed up the distribution of PPP funds this badly, heads would be rolling, people would be fired, there would be massive penalties. And meanwhile, the Trump administration is essentially getting a pass, using with no oversight PPP money being used as a slush fund for Trump's friends and other people in positions of power. It's infuriating, but it's also just really sad and depressing that did we really expect anything else when Trump talks about doing infrastructure spending, he talks about doing it by handing out contracts to his buddies. There's always some crony capitalist background to this. And we're going to continue covering this over on our Instagram page at David Pakman Show. So make sure you're following us there. We're going to take a quick break. I am going to talk about Mary Trump's book coming up next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
So Donald Trump's estranged niece, Mary L. Trump, has been working on a book which is set to be published next week after having the publishing date moved up. The book is called Too Much and Never Enough: How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. So I want to talk about this because there's really a lot going on here. First of all, Mary Trump is the daughter of Trump's brother, Fred Trump Jr. Fred Trump Jr. is the brother who died in 1981. He was 42 at the time of a heart attack caused by alcoholism. This is told as the reason why Trump doesn't drink or smoke cigarettes. The book was scheduled to be published further down the line, but it was moved up to be expected to be published next week. There are a bunch of claims made about Donald Trump in the book. There have been attempts from Trump's family, including Trump's brother, to stop the publication of the book. And then there are also the questions of whether Mary L. Trump's claims can be believed. Now, Donald Trump's advisors and other people around him have claimed that the book is riddled with lies. As you may know, if these lies are actually lies, there is legal recourse, which is called a libel lawsuit. Some of the allegations include that Donald Trump paid someone to take the SATs for him when he was in high school, which was how he got into the University of Pennsylvania. Specifically, the claim is that he paid a kid named Joe Shapiro to take the SAT test for him. The book alleges that Donald Trump was verbally abused by his father, Fred Trump. The book actually says, quote, "Casual dehumanization of people was commonplace at the Trump dinner table." Both Trump and his brother were supposedly abused by their dad, but Trump maybe was less affected by it, according to Mary L. Trump, because he's a, quote, sociopath. Mary Trump claims that Trump's dad viewed apologizing as a sign of weakness. That's interesting because Donald Trump never apologizes for anything. She also says that lying was a way of life in the Trump household, including as a way to get around their dad disapproving of what they were doing. Again, Trump lies all the time and seems to have no qualms whatsoever. She tells the story of where Trump allegedly went to see a movie the night that his brother was sent to the hospital for that alcohol-induced heart attack that ultimately killed him in 1981. She claims Trump has been lying about being religious. Obviously, we knew that one. And she says Trump has never actually gone to church other than when there are cameras there. I actually don't care that Trump is not religious. I did a segment a couple of years ago about whether Donald Trump is the first atheist president. I don't care that Trump isn't religious. What I care about is the fact that he lies and panders by pretending to be religious in order to appeal to evangelical voters. Mary L. Trump, who's also a clinical psychologist, believes she's observed in Donald Trump all 9 criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. We've gone through that criteria. That's also not hugely shocking or groundbreaking. She mentions that he has essentially been institutionalized for his entire adult life and that he might not survive in the so-called real world if he didn't have a business created for him with daddy's money. And I've made the same observation. Donald Trump's behavior as president of the United States, never mind as the guy running the Trump organization, in the real world, in a normal job, Trump would have been fired. Trump would have a real difficulty in holding a job. So that's not a particularly shocking claim. And Mary L. Trump also believes that Donald Trump has an undiagnosed learning disability, which prevents him from processing information. There are also claims that Trump's sister, Marianne Trump Barry, believes a lot of the same stuff privately, but has chosen not to say it publicly. So listen, on balance, I have to tell you, there isn't that much that's newsworthy here or that is new, really. I mean, okay, the claim about paying someone to take his SATs, it's new and it's very specific. Being abused by his dad, that's a new claim, but it's not surprising. I mean, people who treat others like crap often were treated the same way growing up. So when I look at Donald Trump and I look at the bullying on social media, I look at Trump making fun of, I mean, everything, right? Gold Star families, disabled reporters, criticizing Hispanic people, talking about S-hole country, you know, all of this stuff. I see a damaged person who is repeating the same thing they were exposed to. These aren't excuses. Like, he still is a bad president and shouldn't be president, partially because of how he treats others. But it's not groundbreaking to imagine that people that treat others like crap were once treated like crap themselves. You know, the learning disability claim, it's not surprising. We've talked about, is Trump's apparent lack of attention, inability to remember and retain stuff, verbal glitches, you know, all this different stuff. Is there cognitive decline going on? Could it be frontotemporal dementia, the side effect of some medication, drug abuse, whatever, right? There's all these different ideas. Learning disability could also explain a lot of what we see with Donald Trump. It's a reasonable speculation. Specifically, it's new from the book, but it's not altogether surprising. So for me, what's most interesting about the book is that based on what we've observed of Donald Trump for the last 3.5 years as president and much longer insofar as Trump has been a public figure, it's not surprising what is alleged. There's nothing in there where I would go, wow, that's a really crazy claim that's way out of left field. Trump cheats all the time and he believes in buying his way to whatever he needs. So Trump paying someone to take his SATs, if indeed he did it, it's not really surprising. The behavior we've observed, none of it is surprising. And the picture that's painted by Mary L. Trump's book is the picture of an insecure man who lacks knowledge and lacks cognitive capacity, but is extremely narcissistic and has very low morals. And so he's willing to pay for what he needs to pay. He's willing to say whatever he thinks will benefit him at the time. It's a very coherent and consistent picture of the Donald Trump that we know. We will ultimately see whether there are any legal repercussions for what Trump associates are calling a book filled with lies. And that's what I want to talk about next. So we already went through a lot of the allegations made in Mary L. Trump's book about Donald Trump. Trump was verbally abused by his dad. Wouldn't be surprising. He treats people like crap. Often people repeat what they grew up around. Trump paid someone to take his SATs. New claim, but wouldn't be hugely surprising. Trump has a learning disability. It's a new take on Trump's appearing cognitively compromised. Would not be hugely surprising. Trump's not really religious. He only goes to church when there's a camera there or it's advantageous in some way. I mean, like, none of the claims were very surprising. But the people around Donald Trump have reacted explosively to the forthcoming publication of this book. First, you have Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway, who just lost it on Fox News over this book. She actually threatened members of the media saying, quote, "I believe family matters should be family matters," which is that there's a whole other story there where she and her husband have been publicly tweeting stuff related to their daughter, but that's a different story. "I believe family matters should be family matters. I think the thin-skinned, troubled, living in a glass house mainstream media members who think people's families are their business ought to really think thrice the next time they do that." Sort of throwing in a thinly veiled threat at the media there is Kellyanne Conway. Of course, you might notice not actually refuting any of the allegations that are made in Mary Trump's book. Then Trump press secretary Kayleigh McEnany had a hilarious brief statement about this, saying, "I've not seen the book and it's filled with lies." Wait, so you didn't see it, but you know what's in it? Listen very, very carefully here, and this is going to be an instructive moment for us.
No response other than it's a book of falsehoods, and that's about it.
The Mary Trump book just came out right now. You guys probably haven't seen a copy of it at this point, obviously, but the accusations, he's a clinical psychologist, says the president's narcissistic, lying, was a means of self-aggrandizement, all sorts of different allegations. Your response to that on his behalf?
It's ridiculous, absurd allegations that have absolute no bearing in truth. Have yet to see the book, but it is a book of falsehoods. Yeah. All right, thank you guys.
I have yet to see the book, but it's a book of falsehoods. So this is a great opportunity to show you how this administration tries to bully the media and to foment the narrative of fake news, even when it doesn't exist. The narrative that reporters are biased is always the priority for this administration. Kayleigh McEnany clearly said there, I have yet to see the book, but it is a book of falsehoods. ABC reporter Jonathan Karl quoted her verbatim, tweeting, quote, press secretary offers an interesting take on the Mary Trump book. I have yet to see the book, but it is a book of falsehood. So that's Jonathan Karl quoting Kayleigh McEnany verbatim. Kayleigh McEnany tweets in response, don't be disingenuous, Jonathan Karl. Though I don't possess a physical copy of the fictitious book since I'm not in the press corps, my inbox has been flooded with the false claims and excerpts from the book. You know how this works, and yet here you are. But again, her claim was not, I've not seen a physical copy of the book, but I know what's in it, and it's filled with lies, and here are the specific lies. Her claim wasn't, I haven't seen the book, but I know what's in it, and thus I'm able to intelligently comment on it. Her claim was only, I haven't seen the book, and it's a book of falsehoods. And Jonathan Karl quoted her verbatim. But more importantly, this is how they turn the narrative on the reporter. If there are lies in the book, tell us which are the lies. And as of right now, they have not substantively refuted any of the claims. All of the claims are completely consistent with everything we know about Donald Trump. We say it's a lie, or Trump says it's a lie, is not really anything. And it's instructive in how they turn this completely around and make it about the reporter, make it about the fake news media, when really, I mean, I don't want to deflate the importance of this book, because it's a powerful book to hear from someone that was an insider to the Trump family, although she's now estranged. But nothing in the book is even that notable, because it's all so in line with what we've observed from Donald Trump. And when they come out and just say it's all lies, well, is it? Because it all sounds super consistent in the picture it paints of an insecure, narcissistic man with delusions of grandeur, willing to do whatever he believes in the moment will help him get ahead. And that's really the picture that's the Donald Trump we've known. And that's exactly the picture that's painted in the book. And so far, no specific refutation of anything that is in there. We're going to take a break. And coming up after the break, we are going to talk about a Mississippi election commissioner who is furious that, quote, the blacks plan to vote. Yeah, that's coming up next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So let's talk about just a crazy story out of Mississippi. A Mississippi election commissioner was caught on Facebook, I don't know if that's even the right word, posting on Facebook that the blacks are registering to vote and that Mississippians need to do something about it, sort of implying that the blacks in Mississippi aren't really the Mississippians. Obviously, this woman who did this is white. Now, for context, Mississippi is a state in trouble. If you look at American states ranked by Human Development Index, which is a sort of composite statistic of life expectancy, education, and per capita income, Mississippi is dead last. If you look at healthcare rankings, Mississippi is dead last, or sometimes 48th or 49th. If you look at education rankings, Mississippi is 46th. So Mississippi is a place with some serious problems. Black folks make up a large percentage of the Mississippi population, and good for them. They're registering to vote. They're holding voter registration drives. They plan to vote so that they can help their state improve. In other words, you don't vote to ruin your state. You vote to improve your state by having a say in what it is who is going to lead you and what it is that they're going to do. Jones County Election Commissioner Gail Harrison Welch posted on Facebook that she's concerned that lots of the blacks are registering to vote. That's it. That's her concern. There's no caveat. She says, quote, I'm a election. So I'm reading it as she wrote it. I'm a election commissioner in Jones County. I'm concerned about voter registration in Mississippi. The blacks are having lots of events for voter registration. People in Mississippi have to get involved too. Thank you for all you do. By the way, before we get on, this is super funny. A guy named John Welch, who shares her last name and appears to be a family member, responded to her Facebook comment by saying, quote, Gail, you are no longer welcome at family reunions. About 60 years ago, all parts of the Welch family faced a choice, racism or Americanism. The Virginia side of the Welch family, from the Shenandoah, chose America. You are plainly wrong. Which is absolutely hilarious to see her family's dirty laundry aired on Facebook. But eventually, because this was a public post on Facebook, she was confronted about her statement by the local newspaper, the Clarion Ledger. And she said, quote, I don't mean anything by it. I've worked hard to make sure everybody is registered to vote, black or white, everybody. That's just how I am. Now, in my experience, most people who refer to the blacks doing something do mean something by it that is racially tinged, if not straight up racist. And also, when she says the blacks are having lots of events to register voters, people in Mississippi have to get involved too, it is obviously implying that she sees black Mississippians as not really the people of Mississippi. It's the white people in Mississippi that are really the people of Mississippi. Now, her other excuse, and this is crazy because it's not an excuse, her other excuse was the message was meant to be sent as a private message on Facebook. It wasn't meant to be public. I hate to break it to you. All that means is you had the sense to realize it shouldn't be public. It should be private in order to avoid more scrutiny. But it doesn't make it any less racist or any more outrageous. And the real tragedy, and this is the sort of circling around, the real tragedy is she still has this position in Jones County in Mississippi. She said this in a state that is more than 30% black, and she is still an election official in Jones County, Mississippi, at least as of this morning. And if that changes, I will certainly let you know. But this is, the right has this idea that calling someone racist is the worst thing you can do. And they've actually weaponized claims of racism against those who make the claims. You see this very frequently where they've almost made it taboo. They've tried to make it taboo to claim to see racism. And they very often say that seeing racism is the racism, or seeing racism is, quote, playing the race card. That's like the phrase Trump derangement syndrome. These are phrases meant to just shut down debate. They say on the right that the left wants to shut down debate. When you tell anybody who has identified an act of racism that the problem is them mentioning it, that is a form of shutting down debate. Similarly, there's this phrase, you're suffering from TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, when somebody on the internet will make a criticism of Donald Trump. Trump supporters will pop up and they'll say, you're suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. This is a way to just shut down the debate. You're disqualifying the person making the criticism as just being blinded by hatred of Trump and being unable to speak coherently. What you're actually doing is you're shutting down the person and not even having to defend against the claims. That's the same type of thing that we see with, oh, you've identified racism. You're the person who is actually racist. She is still an election official in Mississippi. One of the world leaders most prominently denying the reality of coronavirus has been Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. He has now tested positive for coronavirus. Now, he's 65 years old. He has trivialized the pandemic. He would show up places either without a mask or wearing a mask incorrectly. In terms of total cases in Brazil now, they are second in the world behind the United States. In terms of total deaths, Brazil is now second in the world behind the United States. In terms of per capita, they are also just below the United States in both cases and deaths. And Jair Bolsonaro was bragging in March that if he were to get the virus, he would quickly fight it off and recover because he has a history of being an athlete. He then kept going to large events and to gatherings without wearing a mask or, again, wearing it incorrectly. After announcing that he had tested positive to reporters yesterday, he stepped back and took off the mask and said, "Look at my face, I feel fine." He was also recently with a bunch of his top cabinet members. Everybody was not wearing a mask. Now, I got messages from people saying, David, this could be the best thing that happens to Brazil because this is going to change Bolsonaro's view of coronavirus because he got it himself. I think you're very, very wrong, especially if he fights it off. He is going to be reinvigorated about how this is really no big deal. And, statistically, he's probably going to be fine because, again, most people do not get very sick. Even 65-year-olds who are generally healthy do not get very sick. Here in Massachusetts, I believe the average age of death from coronavirus is like 82 or something like that. So in all likelihood, a relatively healthy 65-year-old is going to be fine. And if he is and he fights it off, it will actually foment him further downplaying it with, see, I told you so. It wasn't really serious. If he were to get really sick, it might change his view. But this guy seems so off the wall nuts and disconnected from reality that it might still not make a difference. And when I was looking online at the comments about this, a lot of people wishing him harm. That is never my take. I don't wish harm on anybody. I'm recognizing the propaganda value of this. And he even posted a video yesterday of himself taking a pill, which he claimed was hydroxychloroquine. He was laughing in the video, talking about how great he feels and how the medication is certainly working well and blah, blah, blah. It's all wacky propaganda. I mean, he truly seems to have some kind of, he has an unusual personality. I don't want to diagnose anything, but it's an unusual personality. Now, the other thing about the more prominent people who get coronavirus is it's believed, or let me put it a different way. There's speculation that when a prominent person gets coronavirus, they are immediately getting access to antibody treatments. When we've seen the success rate of these antibody treatments, where you take convalescent plasma from people who have recovered and have antibodies, and you transfuse it into a sick person, the reports I've seen so far are that that is very, very effective. And there's speculation. I don't want to say anything other than there's speculation that when a prominent or wealthy person gets the virus, they get access to that treatment, which is not widely available because of the limitations. You have to collect plasma from people who have recovered. And that also may be increasing the success in fighting off the virus for prominent or wealthy people. It's mere speculation. That's the latest with the Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro. We have a voicemail number. That number is 2192-DAVID-P. The claims about Donald Trump paying someone to take his SATs have raised questions about my SATs. Take a listen to this.
David, this is Dave from California, and I have a question. Mary Trump said that the president had somebody else take the SATs for him.
Right.
My question is, David, did you take your own SATs?
Yeah.
Bye.
Listen, if I paid someone to take my SATs, I would have come away with a better score. It's kind of a sad, it's not a sad story, but just sort of a story of like being an immigrant family. Because my family came to the United States when I was 5, my parents never went through the college admissions process in the U.S. My mom ultimately went to graduate school here, but that's a very, very different process. And that was after, that was much later anyway. And so I didn't know anything about how do you prepare for the SATs, SAT prep materials, SAT prep classes, or any of it. So I had no preparation and I just showed up and took it. And I did fine enough. I got a 1290 back when it was out of 1600. I believe now it's out of 2400. But, I later learned about other people who were doing prep classes. They had tutors. They took the test multiple times. For me, I just showed up and took it once, and that was it. And it was fortunately good enough to get me into the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Massachusetts. Even applying for school, I was just filling out applications. I didn't understand, you can request an interview and this increases your chances of getting in. There's something called a common application. I filled out individual applications for every school, even though many of them were I just had no idea. But in any case, yes, I took my own SATs. I also took my own GMAT when I took that to get into grad school. Nothing. And again, Had I cheated, I would have gotten myself a better score. Thank you. We have a great bonus show for you today. We're going to talk about how the U.S. is reportedly considering banning TikTok and some other Chinese media. We will talk about Texas is now ready to resume executions after delaying some during the coronavirus pandemic. And New Jersey will now require outdoor masks. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Reminder about next Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, we will have the third ever David Pakman Show chess tournament. I will be playing. Last tournament in June, we had 732 players. I hope to do better than that this time. You can sign up now for free for the tournament at davidpakman.com/chess. We also, on the same day, will be doing a one-day membership special meant to dig us out of a 300-member hole created earlier this month. And you can be notified about this membership special very simply by getting onto our mailing list at davidpakman.com. You go to davidpakman.com, top right of the website, you will see a place where you can type in your email address, get on the mailing list. Tuesday midday, you will get an email with a very powerful, explosive coupon code that will grant you an extraordinary discount off of a membership. And then hopefully that night, as a new member, you'll play in our chess tournament, again, which you can register for at davidpakman.com/chess. I will see you in mere moments on today's bonus show or otherwise tomorrow.